right, who's on Zoom? Who's that?
Nicole, Sean, and Julie. Hi, guys.
All right, everyone test your microphone. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do 10-second introduction of everyone. And that way we'll know Zoom is working and we're engaging in the class. So Zoom, this is your warning. Be prepared for 10-second introduction of who you are. I'm Kevin Campbell. I'm the broker of our office. I've been in real estate since 2016 in multiple roles. I live out west of Plymouth and love servicing anything west of Minneapolis. Good? Good example? All right, who's next?
I'm Alex Chacho. I am about 60 days in, about real estate.
Awesome.
I'm Kaylee Paulson. I've been in real estate the last several months here. I'm from the area. This is my home, Minnesota. I grew up in Fire Lake and currently live in Chanhassen. I have a
I'm Jim Grega. I'm doing this part-time. I'm a dual career. I kind of got going around mid-February. And if there's a group of newbies here, it'd be nice to have a newbie chat.
Newbie chat. I like that idea.
Thank you.
I'm Maureen Trost. I got my license during COVID. I'm a former teacher, and I do a lot of my work out in the West Tonka.
Wonderful. Back in the back.
Oh,
I'm Candy. I'm the Director of Agent Services here, and I really love hearing about everything Kevin has to say.
All right, Zoom. Who's up?
I'll go.
Perfect.
My name is Nicole Ingman. I have been licensed since the end of January, and I will service anywhere in the cities.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nicole. Who's next?
Julie or Sean?
All right. 4,
Don't
3,
be camera shy either, you know.
1. All right. Today's class is a session, really. It's about Ask the Broker is the name of the session. So I want to start with, if you have a couple questions, write them down. And be prepared to ask them of me, and I'll be prepared to share them, the answers with you. And I gotta look again this morning. I have some thoughts on where we can go as well. So you guys get to see my display every time I touch this. Realize. I saw this from Candy this morning. When did you send that email, Candy?
About the training?
Yeah.
9
9 a.m. Maybe I should hit all. 9 a.m. right there. 9:01. Contract writing is kind of where I saw that going, so I thought, okay, well, we will address contract writing, and then we'll address things that pop up that are contentious sometimes, or the most often questions that I get. All right, where do you want to start?
Question.
Like questions from here?
No questions that you get.
Oh,
I'm
perfect.
so curious.
All right. The questions that I get oftentimes come in a spot where I'm going to change the contract. So oftentimes I say, if you don't know what it is, what are you supposed to do?
Read it.
Read it, right. It says it right on the contract. If you don't know what the contract says, well, then read it. And sometimes if you go, I've read it, but I don't understand, that's a great time to call me and say, okay, let me help you understand. Oftentimes, one of the spots that we get confused on is is the written statement portion of the contract. You know what I mean by the written statement portion? So written statement, there are two different sections. I can pull this up. That come to challenge. Let me get a new window or star. The written statement, the forms keep changing because they're trying to give more clarity into what happens with that form. And then sometimes what that does is it creates a little more confusion because people just get used to what it was and then they say, hey, let's make that more clear, and then it becomes less clear for them. We're going to just get a form here. We're going to look at the form called purchase agreement. And can you spot it? Don't need an amendment. I just want the purchase agreement. And we're going to look at purchase agreement. Standalone form. We'll kind of keep this on as a tool. And then we can kind of walk through some of these things. But one of the spots that we'll skip ahead is we'll go to the written statement. Did that pass it? Yeah. Written statement is part of the financing addendum area that's in here. There we go. Right there. So written statement, if you're given written statement, so that's the first one here is very clear. Line 70 of that says if the buyer cannot secure financing specified in the purchase agreement and the purchase agreement does not close on the closing date, this purchase agreement shall be canceled. Now, remember, you can always change if a closing date is going to change or something. You can always just add an amendment that says closing date will be whatever. So you can extend that closing time. But buyer and sell, if it doesn't close on the closing date, this purchase agreement is canceled. Buyer and seller shall immediately sign a cancellation of the purchase agreement, confirming said cancellation and directing all earnest money be paid here, be refunded to the buyer or retained, forfeited to the seller. That's what. So if it doesn't close on time, that's directing what you do, right? Oftentimes, the seller side is going to want to say, hey, we don't want to wait till the closing to realize this isn't going to close. And so these next section of written statement are talking about a written statement is given by the lender that says, hey, everything is good to go. We're through all the things that we need to do on our side. And now all we need to do is the closing, right? And a written statement, so 104 through 108 says, what happens if that written statement, which is due, is not given, okay? If a written statement is not provided by the date specified on line 78, it's not given, and yet we are not at the closing. That's what the first section is. It's not given, written statement is not given, and we are not at the closing. So if a written statement is not provided by the date specified on line 78, seller may, at seller's option, whose option? Seller can say, hey, we did not receive written statement. We want to cancel this purchase agreement. So they can declare this purchase agreement canceled by written notice to the buyer at any time prior to the seller receiving written statement, in which case this purchase agreement is canceled. At any time refers to the time between when you said you were going to give it and the date that it is right now before closing. It doesn't mean they can go before your written statement and cancel. It's the date that you said you were going to have it and the date that it is now not yet closing. Okay.
Typically, When is that date? Typically a week before?
Oftentimes people do a week before. Sometimes if there's gonna be a long closing, they'll say, fine, move up the written statement if all we're willing to do is, write on there. Here's one of the things that pops up sometimes. People say, well, we guarantee the earnest money, right? Oftentimes that's one of the earnest money is non-refundable. And then their contract language says something completely different. And then something goes wrong and your buyers are saying, well, I thought I was protected by this. And the seller is saying, no, it was non-refundable. So when you write an amendment, make sure your amendment is in line with really what you're trying to say in your contract, especially if you're writing the amendment and submitting it with your PA. Remember, your amendment supersedes your contract. Your amendment supersedes your contract. You're amending the contract. Your amendment supersedes the contract. Okay? So if a written statement is not provided by the date specified on line 78, let's say that's May 1st. If between May 1st that was supposed to do, today is May, what is today? 14th. The closing's the 30th, right at the end of the month. Is there 30 days in May? 31. Okay, so it's 31st. Right now we're in this spot between our buyer was supposed to give a written statement. They haven't given it yet. What can the seller do? They have the right to cancel. Great. On that first one, if you're representing the buyer, what should be checked?
Anytime before closing.
Right. Anytime before closing is the best interest of your client, right? But that's that first one.
Oh, sorry.
But retained by the buyer is often makes sense. Look, and you should be able to negotiate this. If we don't deliver on our written statement date, you have the right to cancel, but we want the money back. The next one says, okay, now we're at the closing table. You've come, you don't have the money anymore. Now who retains? Does the buyer retain the money or does the seller retain the money or does the buyer get refunded? That's what the next section is about.
So the next one is past the written statement date.
The first one is past the written statement date. 104 through 108 is past the written statement date, not yet closing. 109 to 112 is we've hit closing. It didn't close. Now what happens? Oftentimes, remember this. Oftentimes, it is best for both parties to close, right? So oftentimes, you'll want to say, okay, I'm going to send you an amendment for a closing date. And your lender's going to say, because they want to close the property too, hey, we're going to do all that we can to make this thing close. If your lender says there is no way that I'm going to be able to make this closing date and they share that with you, what's your obligation? You gotta let the agent know, right? Hey, my client is probably going to be in default of this contract. And that's your responsibility on the front end. All right, good. Does that answer that question? Go ahead.
So if you're representing the buyer, you're gonna check refunded to buyer on both of them. If you're a listing agent and your seller is saying, what's the point of earnest money unless people are going to refund it to me if this doesn't go to closing? Is it unreasonable for a seller to ask for that to be retained by the seller if you're not in a multiple offer situation?
Is it unreasonable? That's a good question. Depending on the environment that we're in, changes whether something is reasonable or no longer reasonable. If we're in a buyer's market, a 2-week inspection period is reasonable. I'm going to take all the time that I can to look at this. And I would say it's reasonable in most time, right? You're going to make the largest purchase of your life. You probably want some time to make sure that the things are in order. However, when we're in a seller's market, then what happens is people are waiving inspection like crazy. Is it reasonable? You're going to make the largest purchase of your life. You've only been in the house 15 minutes, and now you're going to pay $500,000 for this property. Is that reasonable? I don't think that's super reasonable. However, if you put an inspection period on this house, you're probably not gonna get it. Would you like to do? Right? That's the question, is it reasonable or not? Everything in the contract is negotiable to go back and forth. Is it in the best interest of your client? Well, it depends what their interest is. If their interest is, I want to secure the property with a buyer or a seller or whatever, it might change how you put things in. When I look at, this spot and I'm working with the listing side, I'm gonna say to my listing, and I'm representing the buyer, okay, you're the listings. I'm gonna say, here's the deal. We put in a written statement here, and we're willing to move that written statement up. If we can't hit that written statement date, it would make most sense for us to get that money back. But if we get in closing, I would let you far know that it would make more sense that it would go to the seller. So let's negotiate on those spots. And that's what I would talk to my client. I would say, once we get to the closing table, if we don't close, sellers are gonna retain. Prior to that, my buyers are gonna retain. Because I can
For
negotiate that.
lines 108 and 112, then would it be that it would be, in the scenario you just said, it would be refunded to the buyer on 108 and refunded to the seller on 112?
Retain to buy the seller on 114.
So you could always start with both. going
You
to
can
the
always
buyer.
start, yeah. Remember, you represent the best interest of that party. So, there are other spots, right, where you can go, in a seller's market, all of these things come like these assessments. Prorated from the day of closing, prorated from the day of closing. Now there are some deferred things, right? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, in the seller's market, when, there's lots of sellers around, and there's lots of buyers around, how do you navigate that? If, one seller brings more to the table than any, or other, vice versa, that
Yeah.
variances in that?
Yeah, for sure there are. So in the seller's market, it means there are fewer homes available than buyers to buy them, right? That more people want to. What happens in the seller market, the prices go up, inspections, contingencies go down, lots of contingencies go down because a seller has something that lots of buyers want, right? Supply and demand. There's little supply, lots of demand, home prices go up. On terms and conditions, remember every contract are terms and conditions. So all of that goes in the seller's favor. Now all of a sudden we have more inventory than is selling, that starts to go the other way. And what happens in a buyer's market is people are asking for 3% in closing costs. They're asking for long inspections. They're asking for the seller to pay, whatever they might. They do an inspection and they say, we want all of these items fixed before we buy your house. Flip that around, seller's market, they do an inspection, they say, but we're just doing it for our own information. We're not gonna ask you for you to fix that, right? So it all depends on what kind of spot. When you're in a balanced market, then you get kind of how is this a win-win for both parties, right?
To go back to before you get into these assessments, sometimes in the MLS, in the agent remarks, it'll request that on your PA you put in the written statement lines instead of the other one.
Yeah.
Why do some agents do that? And I mean, only some you see that, like,
Yeah.
and not all, more often, I guess.
So, agent remarks are geared to who? The agent, right? So, what happens in those agent remarks is how do we are preempting questions that we might get, right? So, one of them is written statement. Written statement requested at least 2 weeks prior to closing, right? With earnest money being refunded to or retained by seller. If I'm writing that, I represent the seller, which I would in those remarks. That's just saying, hey, this is one of the things that we're not going to negotiate on. Doesn't mean you cannot submit the other way. No, right? Because you can negotiate a contract however you want. It just means that this is what they're asking for. One of the things that I would write in my agent remarks is, my clients hope to be pending by 8 o'clock Monday morning. What does that mean?
Your offers.
Means get your offers in. What else does it mean? means no inspection. We don't want contingencies. We want to go right to pending, right? So I'm giving notice to people on that side. It's just saying, hey, it's a seller's market. We know it's a seller's market. Here's what we are anticipating. Don't give us offers that don't bring us right to pending. Nope.
Doesn't it protect your seller though to have an inspection? From a legal standpoint, isn't it in your best interest?
Help me understand why.
Okay, I think I'll give you an example. Listing I had on Lake Minnetonka, they did every inspection they did a lot of inspection. And after we closed and months after new buyer was living in the house, there was a fire in the chimney, in that house. And I felt protected, and I felt like my seller felt protected because they did do an inspection of the chimney. They did do all those, because I felt like that could have turned into a legal battle.
What's my obligation as a seller? Disclose what I know. I'm not obligated to go and find the things I do not know about the property. So in inspection, the challenge with an inspection, pre-inspection, and sometimes I like pre-inspections and I would do that. But we talked about this as a group. The challenge with a pre-inspection is, what if I find out that, my insulation is really not good enough for the house anymore? What if I find out, they went up on the roof and they're seeing things that I had no clue were damaged? What if they find out, they do a sewer inspection or, sewer inspection, a scope, and there's stuff in there. Well, now that I know that, if I don't disclose that, then it's on me. However, if I did not know those things, the buyer moved in, they had the right to do an inspection if they requested it, and it was part of our negotiation. They move in, and something goes wrong with those things. If I knew and did not disclose, I'm liable. If I did not know and therefore did not disclose, then I'm only responsible to disclose the things I know. Now, what happens if your clients do a pre-sale inspection? You see the pre-sale inspection, and they say to you, but I don't think that's a big deal, so we're not going to disclose that. You are obligated to disclose that, right? You are always obligated to disclose. Your client can sign a waiver. Can you sign a waiver? No, you're obligated to disclose. So if you walk in and you saw the roof was leaking and they're doing a non-disclosure, but you say, hey, it's dripping here, you have an obligation to tell the other side, hey, just to let you know, I saw water dripping from the ceiling on the spot. You might want to share that with your client. Right? Good? Okay, question.
So if the buy side did an inspection, but they decided to not make an inspection contingency, they wanted to still have an inspection for peace of mind, but they did not want to limit the seller.
Yep.
With the contingency, you would still go to pending, right? As long as there were no other contingencies. If they're like, we just want it like kind of like a peace of mind inspection. We don't want to hold, you put in your agent remarks, we want to be pending by Monday. So they were like, yeah, okay, we won't make it contingent, but we still want to do it.
Right. So you could put that on your amendment or whatever. You could write as one of your terms, prior to closing, clients are going to do an inspection, right? Because you already have, this is good, we can go to inspection spot here. Because in our inspection spot, the 171 purchase agreement is or is not is not contingent upon any inspection of the property obtained. So that's where you get to decide, hey, we're going to do one. So you could say we're going to do one, It's not contingent. And then, intrusive testing, by the way, is if you put a hole in the wall or have to dig something out underneath it. Oftentimes you won't need to do it. Sometimes stucco will require you to do it and fix it. So, that's what that spot is.
Alex, it's not.
Elects and is not. It's not contingent. Yep, we're gonna do it within certain number of calendar days. And then you write something, right here, if it was a contingent. As stated above, the inspection is not contingent, just simple peace of mind prior to closing.
I kind of moved us along, but you were gonna talk about special.
Actually, let's just work through this contract.
Okay.
We'll work through the contract. This first part is very simple, right? It's who are the buyers? How many, if Mr. and Mrs. are married, and they're gonna purchase the house, who needs to go on the purchase agreement? That was a trick question.
1 to buy, 2.
1 to buy, 2 to sell. So depends how they want to do it, right? But they could just have one person on there. They both could have it on there. Have you guys ever heard stories of like one spouse surprising the others with the house? Like we went, right? You can do it that way. You can't sell without having 2 signatures, but you can buy. The next one here is, where's that earnest money going to go? By the way, this was a question I got this last week. When is the earnest money due?
3 days after acceptance.
What's it say right there? Can you see it? 2 days with when? After final acceptance. Do you have to submit earnest money with your offer? No. 2 what kind of days?
Business.
Business days. So if I'm submitting an offer on Saturday, when's the earnest money due? Tuesday. That's right. So there's no reason to stress out, freak out, any of those pieces. Don't worry about it till it gets accepted. Now, should your client be prepared to do the earnest money right away? Yes, right? Trust funds, by the way, is always the best way to do it. It's simple to track, all those different things. But it's 2, right? Then the next part is the broker's responsibility. All right, so 2 days is going to go in trust funds. This other line here, the checkbox, what's that check for?
Holding it.
So by default, where's the earnest money going to go? Listing broker. If that box is checked, then where's it going to go?
Buyer's broker?
Anywhere else that you put on there that has a trust account, right? That's a section set. But the default is it's going to go to the listing broker. If that box is checked, then you're directing it somewhere else. Okay? Whether it be title, whether it be trust account, whatever it might be. Typically, it goes to the listing broker. Then you want the street address, city of, county of, state of, with the zip code, and the legally described. Does it make sense to put all that in there?
Yes.
Yes. The answer is yes, because you want to make sure people know what they're purchasing. So put all that information. All right, here we go. This is the next spot that gives us issues. Lines 16 through 36. And it talks about what's in that section. It talks about what am I buying? What's all in that? What do I get the blinds? Do I get the TVs? Do I get the stove? Do I get the plants? I have this awesome plant in my garden. Do I get the vegetables that are already planted? Who gets those? All those different things. And you know what? I have a cheat sheet for you. So here are the things that stay.
And we can email this out as well to those on Zoom.
Here you go. Here are the things that stay and they are purchasing with the property. So one of the confusing parts are any of the following if they're built in: dishwashers, refrigerators, wine and beverage. Refrigerators in here twice. Oh, wine and beverage refrigerators, trash compactors, oven, stove. What does built in mean? Attached. Are your refrigerators attached? No, sometimes they are, right? However, are they, is there a section around the cabinets for your refrigerators to be built in? Oftentimes, right? Refrigerators like that should stay. Dishwashers, are your dishwashers built in? Right? They go under the countertop. They have cabinets around them. It might not be secured with a bolt because they come out, but they're built into there. Your ovens and ranges, are they built in? Right? There's cabinets around, they're built in. Your washers and dryers, are they built in?
No.
Times, right? There's cabinets around them, there are different things that fit in it. Oftentimes, no, washers and dryers are not put in there. So those are one of the things that you might want to add. But if you look at this, air conditioning equipment built in. Is your window unit built in? No. So if your clients are buying a property and they have window units on each of the spots, you would want to write in this next section, additionally, you would write window units, window ACs, you would write on there. Do you need a separate personal property for a window unit? You really don't, because your lender's going to go, hey, I get it. This is part of the house, right? If you're putting a boat in there, do you need a separate personal property agreement for the boat? Yes, you do need that. Yes. Can you sell a boat for $1? No, you cannot. You cannot. It's not allowed, actually. On your purchase agreement, it has to be a close value. There has to be an actual value to that boat. You can't write on your purchase agreement. That's a tricky thing because people do it all the time because they go, oftentimes you see the $1, but we'll look at that. We'll look at the purchase agreement.
It's easier for the lender, title and everything. It's like, okay, let's say they buy a lake house and they have a boat, they have jet skis, they have all these things. It's easier for you to say, you know what, why don't we just go to closing without that in there and you work it out with the seller after closing, or is it better to put it in?
So here's the challenge. The challenge, one of the reasons a personal property agreement came so popular, especially in those things, is it became a way to avoid lenders. And one of the reasons you don't want it on the PA, is because like a pool table, that's one of those things that stays often. The lender goes, I'm not financing a pool table, right? So that's oftentimes where that property can be left. That's why personal property agreements kind of get in there. My suggestion to you is yes, Maureen, what you said is now. However, if you're buying a lake home and the dock's included, I would write dock on because it's an addition. It services the property. I would not write the boat on there, but I would write the dock because it makes sense that the dock is part on the property.
On the PA.
On the PA goes with that. Lenders get that. It's when you start adding the dock and the boat and the 4 jet skis. They're going, wait a minute, we're not financing those items. We're financing the property. Okay. All right. So air conditioning, air exchange system, electric air filter, environmental remediation system, the fireplace, the screens, the doors, the heater, heating systems, humidifier, sump pump, and thermostat controls. One of the items that we see on here, it might be on here, let's go. Garage door openers are part of the property, so you're gonna leave it. Any shelving that's built in. This is oftentimes where people have issues. What does it mean to be built in? Just be very clear. If you go into a garage and has stuff all over it, and your clients are going, hey, we really like this, make sure you just identify, which includes all shelving in the garage, shelving and cabinets in the garage, right? Because they might say, well, really it's a racking system. The racks are included, but the stuff that's on the rack is not included. That's just the mounting system. The mounting system will stay, but the other stuff will not. Like TVs, the mounting will stay, but the TV does not have to stay. Right? Do you guys know that? So if you're selling,
They were like mounted in there, they were part of the house.
nope, the mounting stays. TV does not have to stay. TV is a personal property.
Write that in.
If you want the TVs, you can say TVs and mounts stay. Okay. TVs are really cheap. Sometimes people get attached to their items. They might say that TV was my first TV. It was given to me by my uncle. I would say, why are you fighting over a TV? Go spend $200 after closing and buy a different TV. So my argument almost all the time is take personal property out of it. You guys are realtors. You're not auction people for personal property.
You recommend, putting in the sentence like as seen on such and such date, so that you get like the stainless steel fridge and not white one you put in there?
Yeah, it's as seen on is difficult because what did you see? You can reference the pictures that were on it. You can write as seen on there, and then we changed it. If they were honest and they said, yeah, we changed it. But if they say, well, if there was the same one in there. But you could also in your PA, are MLS pictures part of the contract? As seen on the MLS, are the pictures part of the contract? Or is the information on the MLS part of the contract? Right, so no, but you could reference the pictures that were seen on the MLS. Yeah.
You do hear about that happening sometimes.
Yes, or especially on washers and dryers, or yeah, we just put a cheap one in there and we took her the nicer one. Which, by the way, should realtors do that? No, right? Obviously, it's not what we wrote in our contract. We're not buying the same property. And if you knew that would happen in the other agent, you would call the other agent and say, hey, they took out the other that in there. You saw our purchase agreement was for that one. That realtor would have to say, yep, you're right. Your client would win the argument. So, because you wrote it. Attached lighting and bulbs. So you cannot remove your light bulbs. They have to stay. Carpeting wall to wall. So not your rugs, but your carpeting. Your fan fixtures, not one that you plug in, but the fixtures, intercoms built in, speakers built in. So if they have speakers mounted in the ceiling or on the walls, that stuff stays, that's built in. Security equipment, shelving built in, smoke detectors, TV antennas, cable and TV jacks and wiring, TV satellite dish, wall mounts, wall ceiling mounted speakers and mounts. These are speakers and mounts. Speakers would stay as well. And workbenches built in.
Light bulbs?
Yeah.
So, smart bulbs now, and then not having to like disconnect much of the house, could you swap out your smart bulb for a generic bulb, or would you just?
You would do that before you list the property. Yep. Well, the idea is I am buying. This PA is for the property that my clients just saw. They're buying it that way. Good? Towel rods, mirrors, fuel tanks, plumbing fixtures. Sometimes what will happen is water softeners, right? Well, that water softener is gone. Well, we rented it. It wasn't ours. So you want to make sure you're clear on that. Purification systems sometimes. Now say I have a Ring doorbell. What happens to the Ring doorbell?
You're not allowed to record.
So the record people, you can't record their audio. It's a weird thing on the spot. If you guys are doing negotiations, you should probably just leave the property. More than anything, you're supposed to. You can leave your Ring doorbell there. You're supposed to deactivate your Ring doorbell so you're not recording conversations. But that's a fixture, by the way. Your Ring doorbells are fixtures, so if you have it there, that would stay. The great thing to do is take something like this, give it to your client, and say, if you have anything that you want to make sure, I have that fan in the bedroom I was going to take, or these curtains were homemade from whatever, all that stuff should just be removed before you go live. If there's a shed in the back of the house or side of the house, does the shed stay? Yes. Shed is a fixture. Yep. Shed stays.
If there's like a kids playhouse.
Kids playhouse, does it stay? Yes. Kids playhouse is a fixture. Probably not one of those light ones that you can move, but if that playhouse has been there for outside like that for the last 5 years, that means it's fixed. It's a fixture. Built-in hot tub, does it stay? Yeah, there's a spot, there's a nice deck all around it. Does it stay? Fixture. It's fixed to the property.
Is it in the PA?
It would be part of all this list of systems. I would also write that on there of, hey, there's and that's what these lines are for, is this is included. And sometimes they'll write on their hot tub not included in purchase. It's okay to declare something's not, I mean, a fixture is not going with the property. You can declare that, it just has to be on your PA. It's not good enough just to be on the MLS. It has to be on the PA. Remember, an MLS, an email, all that stuff is not legally binding. The PA is.
Let's flip it, and I'm sorry, I'm just for time, we have like 15 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Let's say you are on the buyers, you forgot to put on your PA, like, oh, they said that's staying. When it comes to you as, now you're the listing agent.
Yeah.
Where do you put on there that this is not going with it? Like, do you put it on this line if you're representing the listing? Or do you put it on like an amendment that also?
Yeah, you can do it either way. One, you have the line right here. The following items are excluded from the purchase agreement, so you can write that right there. And you could do that on the counter if you got it without those items excluded. You just write a counter line. The following items are excluded from the spot. You can also do that if parties agree. Remember, it's easiest to negotiate on the front end, but if parties agree, hey, we never put that in on an amendment, let's put that amendment together because it's listed here. My clients have the understanding. Let's just put that on the amendment and then move forward. Okay. Good. Helpful? This helpful? Purchase price. I don't get a ton of questions about the purchase price. Do you guys have purchase price questions? Financing questions?
How do you write? So let's say make an offer and you've already decided that you're willing to go above that offer.
Yeah.
To a certain point.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I just said. You write it in there like that. We'll beat the highest offer up to say block 300 or $1,000 over. I don't know.
Yeah. So what those are called is accelerated offer, not accelerated, escalation clauses. Okay, escalation clause. In the seller's market, we'll often see escalation clauses. The challenge I have with the escalation clause, I'm the selling agent, right? You say to me, we're gonna write at 300, but we'll go we'll go up to $326,000 over your highest offer, up to 326. What do I say? I say to my clients, these people are willing to go to 326. We don't have to share the next highest offer. Let's counter at 326. Right? If I already know you're willing to go there, then let's do that. So sometimes the other agent will say, well, we're only willing to go there if we saw another one. And I'll say, okay, well, my clients are willing to work with you at this spot. Do you want to accept this offer? Do you want me to go to a different person? So there's a game playing on escalation clauses. On one of the things that you could do on an escalation clause is you could say, sellers are willing to, or buyers are willing to go offer at 300, and beat $1,000 over next highest price to 326 or whatever. With the first page of the purchase agreement. So you see the price that they had, so there's proof on it. They're tricky escalation clauses. Some listing agents will say, give us your highest and best. I don't want to see escalation clause, because what happens sometimes, remember, it's terms and conditions, right? So price and terms are part of your thing. So we might have an offer that's very similar, but what if you are at what if you're at 325 with no with an inspection, and this person's at 324 with an inspection, or without the inspection? You have the inspection, they don't. Well, what's the better offer to accept? One goes pending right away, one to back out for any reason, no reason at all. Those are all things that we gotta look at. So when I have buyer's agent side, I say, look, I'm not just gonna compete on the price because there are different terms in this. You might be very similar. Give me your highest and best price.
I was gonna say, I always put in my agent remarks on the listing side, I put absolutely no love letters and absolutely no escalation clauses. I don't want to deal with the game playing. I don't want another agent coming back to me and saying, well, then you didn't get a hold of me and let me know that my client has to come back. And like, if you're in a multiple offer situation, it becomes so much to navigate, and you want to make sure you're doing everything fair and you're not.
There's an interesting thing, right? Whose best interest do I serve?
Seller.
The
Well, if you're at the
seller.
listing.
Do I have to be fair to every other buyer? No. Do I have to present every offer I receive? Yes. Do I have to call them and say, hey, we actually have something here, and I just want to let you know that they're changing there, so I'm going to call, they're at an escalation, so I'm going to reach out to you and just let you know we're actually in escalation. Do I have that obligation?
Does it in you say, seller had given me permission to let other buyers know.
That we have multiple offers, right?
Right.
So, hey, we have multiple offers. You don't disclose what those offers are.
Oh.
But I don't, never disclose what other offers are. That's a violation. Don't do that. But sometimes what happens if you don't accept escalation clauses, you might be leaving money on the table. Because if you get two parties that are both in escalating clauses, you can say to them, hey, you guys are close, and then always talk with your client. Now that we've escalated to the spot of your highest, right? You were here, two of you brought it way up here. I want your final and best offer, right? Then you can do that spot. But what happens sometimes is you get a lot of people, when you're receiving multiple offers, you get like people in sections. So you get the people that their offer is just crap. You don't want to look at their offer. Then you get some that are like, this is not a bad offer. This is good. And then you get some, and if it's one that's just way up here, I would say proceed with caution, right? And the reason I'd say proceed with caution is because you're not just looking for the best offer, you're looking for the best closing. And if things are way out of whack, you got to ask yourself, what's going to change between now and closing that this one's just going to fall apart? Hey, I know we said we're going to buy it at this, but our appraisal came back and it's back in this section. I know we said we're going to buy it this, but we had a contingent upon a sale and it didn't sell. Now you're back in this section. So I'd be very careful with the outliers. Doesn't mean your clients should not accept them. Just make sure you're explaining all the risks of that. And they get to accept whatever, but I can think of, I was helping an agent in our office with a listing. We had some great offers and we had the one outlier that was contingent upon the sale of a property. That property didn't sell. Now what you have to go back to your client and say is, and by the way, I was in this section, you should not accept this, here's some cash offers, here's some whatever, but this one doesn't sell. Now you gotta come back and go, hey, this one is not gonna close. By the way, the next offer you're gonna accept is back in this section. And the reality is, this is what your home's worth. Was where these are. That person was an outlier. They made a crazy bid because they're not closing on it anymore. So be careful with the outliers. Good? All right, let me just do this real quick. This is where I was going to cover, so I'm just going to do this really quickly with you. Oops, let's go reset. Okay, where purchase agreements go off the rails. Ready? One is in the contract of formation. On the surface, it seems really easy, but remember, don't add weird language to your things to make it more complicated than it is. All right? Does it make them part of the contract? Or if there's an email, you have a signed agreement, you do any of that stuff? Real quick question. Does it, if you say you send an email, oh yeah, this is included. Is it part of the contract? No. The only way something's part of the contract is if it's in the contract, either as a purchase agreement, as an addendum, which means you're adding something to it, or as a amendment, which means you're changing it, okay? Amendments are convenient ways to alter the terms of the purchase agreement without redoing the entire thing, right? So I'm going to counter offer, I'm going to do something in an amendment that way. Remember, an amendment supersedes the purchase agreement. Amending a purchase agreement is number 2. And the reason number 2 gets really is the number 2 thing that takes it off the rails. The reason is because we put things in there because we want to write them as lawyers and we're not lawyers, right? So they're challenging on that spot. So be careful of the language you write in the amendment, all right? That includes your inspection period, your inspection items. When you write, we'll get to that. Number 3. Contingencies. Our financing are we clear in the financing that we're doing? Is it contingent? Is this property contingent on financing? What happens when financing falls apart? What happens when I want to change financing? That's another spot for things to fall off the rails. Default in terms. Our purchase agreement says things that we just looked through by like a written statement. If it doesn't happen, then this is immediately canceled and both parties shall sign, right? However, what do we know about earnest money? The only way it's returned is by what? Mutually agreeing, right? So if you sign a cancellation, you might be able to cancel the contract, but you can't sell the house again. You can't do, you have the earnest money piece out there. So you either need mutual agreement, statutory rescission, or a court order. Oftentimes, it's best for both parties to keep a offer moving forward. Okay. Those are the 4. I'll send you this thing. Question for you. We're doing an inspection, right? We're in a 5-day inspection period. We're on day number 2, and sellers just received an awesome offer. Can they cancel the purchase agreement and accept the new offer? The answer is no. During the inspection period, the person with all the power, the party with all the power, is the buy side. They already have an agreement. So the seller can say, now let's say I've come to you and I've asked you to do things. Can I say, nope, agreement's canceled? I cannot, because I'm still in the contingency. So I can say, nope, I'm not going to accept those things. What happens if we don't come to an agreement and nothing else changes? what happens to the purchase agreement? Buyer has asked for things, seller hasn't responded, what happens?
So it's not,
What's that?
and it still continue until they.
Purchase agreement continues as originally written, right? Without any changes, as originally written. You do an inspection and you're in your last day, you've asked for things to the buyer. The buyer hasn't or the seller hasn't responded, and your clients only want to purchase this house if these items are done. What must you do? You must sign a cancellation, right? If you don't, that will move forward. Sometimes the listing strategy is, we're just not going to respond. Especially if you come in last day of your inspection period and ask for a bunch of things, we're not going to respond. If you as the listing agent, which by the way, your fiduciary duties is time, right? If you don't tell your client, by the way, if you don't cancel by midnight, you're going to buy the house the way it was, not with what's on your inspection agreement, the way it was before that. So a seller cannot cancel during the contingency, but a buyer is not guaranteed any changes during that time either. And in fact, if they do not cancel during that contingency, they will move forward with how the original purchase agreement was written. Good? Does it make sense? All right. It is 12. We have another party coming in here. That is it. Helpful?
This on the website?
Yeah, would you guys like these? I'll tell you what, I'll send it to Candy and Candy can send it out. How about that?
Great.
Awesome.